Hello guys, and welcome back to another factory logistics guide. Now in the first episode of the logistics guide we covered all things conveyor bus related, but today we're covering all things train related. So if you do find this video helpful, why not drop me a thumbs up? And don't forget you can find me also live on Twitch. Anyway, let's get started. Now I should mention this is all based on my opinions and it's not a necessity to follow my ideas, but quite often I do get asked why you would use trains over conveyor buses in game, and they do have a good point. Conveyor throughput is the bottleneck in this game. Even with a train station having two inputs, no matter the train's throughput speed, it's still limited by the two conveyors' throughput speeds. So what's the point in using trains other than they just look really cool? Firstly, trains have a high upfront cost but are under most circumstances cheaper to construct compared to conveyors. For example, a single train route spanning 750 meters using two locomotives costs in excess of 13,000 iron ore, 4,500 coal, 4,800 limestone and 1,100 copper. Whereas for the same route with a single Mark IV conveyor bus, you will be spending 13,500 iron ore, 13,500 coal and 11,250 limestone. Quite the difference, and if you were to run an extra conveyor, you're looking at double the price. And I should also mention that yes, that is including the freight stations as well as the locomotives. Trains are also able to transfer power between factories, meaning you can connect a mining outpost to a single train station and you won't have to worry about setting up a power plant or running cables between two factories. Over medium to long distances, they're also a lot faster, providing a much higher throughput and are great for personal travel. And even across much longer distances, they still have a higher throughput than most conveyors. And if you're not sure, I have actually covered this in one of the previous videos, which I will put in the top right hand corner now. Train networks are also really easy to expand. Just add an extra station or some more freight carts and you'll increase the throughput of your logistics. Another perk is that they can hold liquids without needing to use a pump. But then again, the power consumption of trains is greater than pumps in most situations, so that can be a double-edged sword. Also, unlike vehicles, which we'll be covering in part 3 of the logistics guide, they don't require a fuel type, although they do run on power and they're currently a little less buggy than vehicles. And finally, with a bit of tender loving care, they can look really great and really make your factory stand out. Anyway, let's move on to their cons. Like we mentioned, they do require power to run. They also take up a fair amount of space, and equally they can struggle with vertical travel unless you're willing to build large spiral corkscrews or slowly ascending ramps. Another potential downside is because they are unlocked in Tier 6, you may have already set up a lot of your conveyor buses for bringing items into the base, but this really shouldn't discourage you. And obviously, like we mentioned, they are limited by a conveyor's throughput to a certain extent. So now that you know the pros and cons to trains, let's set them up. Now I will go into more details about setting up train networks in a future video, but for now we will just touch on the basics, and we also do have previous tutorial guides on trains available. Again, I'll put the link above. Now there are two ways in which you can set up a train network. You can either use a push-pull system or a circuit. Now a push-pull system consists of a single train station at each of the ends of the track pointing in opposite positions and two locomotives facing opposite one another. This will allow you to run the train back and forth between the two stations, and this is a very basic setup that's perfect for a single train on the track. You can also add more, but I don't recommend this as we are expecting train collision to become a thing in future updates. Our next option is to create a circuit, and this is done either by creating one large loop or a loop after two end stations connecting a track back on itself, or by running two tracks in parallel, each for one-way direction. Now, I would highly recommend adopting either a single large circuit or a parallel track system, again for the same reason we're using push-pull systems, as they are planning on adding train collision and we may also have issues with signaling. When it comes to transporting over a rail network, there are many complicated ways to set up a track using things like roundabouts and splits. However, for this we will just concentrate on a simple setup. Placing a rail is simple. Click for placing the start point of a rail and then click a second time for the end point of a rail. Often people find it difficult to make straight lines of track after placing a curve, and the trick here is to place the straight lines of the track first and then add the curve. And also, whilst we're on the subject of curves, to create a 90-degree turn, you will want to have a single line placed coming into the curve, followed by foundations placed 3 ahead and 3 to the left or right. This will show the end point of the 90-degree corner, and you will now want to place another piece of straight track from the end point onwards. Once done, you can now connect the two straight portions of track together to create this nice 90-degree corner. Now, I will go into trains in more detail soon, but until then, I've already covered some train tutorials like I've mentioned that should give you the information you need to get started. And with us having covered the basics of a rail network, let's look at a few ways in which you can build railways. Obviously, we can place rails along the floor, but similar to the same problem we had with conveyors being placed on the floor, they do tend to get in the way whilst exploring, so ideally you want to raise them off the ground. Here are a few ideas for when it comes to building a suspended rail system. There's also no need to support them should you wish not to, but I prefer giving them supports whether built into the terrain or freestanding. Also, if you have a particularly large factory, then another option is to fully encase the trains inside a tunnel. This looks pretty cool whilst using the half-pipe foundations, but might be better suited to automated rail, as the third-person view might distract some players. And with collisions possibly being able to kill players, it might be good to segregate the trains from anywhere you can cross by accident in the factory. Once your train network is set up, we need to select the freight stations and set them to picking up or dropping off items, which can be done in the station interface. Once done and connected to power, we can add a train, and in manual we can drive the train as and when required, or we can go into the train screen and switch it to automated, allowing us to set up a train timetable, which will allow us to choose in which order the train travels around the circuit. This will make the train continue traveling around the circuit in this order until we tell it to stop. We can set the automated train timetable either in the train screen or in a train station screen. Now, with a train having a higher throughput, you may well be able to set up a single train to pick up and drop off multiple items, but do be aware that you should use a minimum of 1 freight cart per resource unless you're using smart splitters to split different resources from one another. Also, remember, do use the overflow system and sync any items because that can cause bottlenecks. So with us covering the basics of a network, when should you use trains in Satisfactory? Well, as we mentioned earlier, in terms of resource cost, anything longer than about 500 meters is resource efficient for trains. However, my preferred method is to use conveyors to pull items from several nodes in one location to a single train station, which then takes all these items to a large central station, which uses smart splitters to send items off to dedicated trains for that particular resource. From there, these dedicated trains will be sent off to the main factory, and you can also consider load balancing all your freight station inputs in the nexus so that all your resources are equally dispersed throughout the dedicated train for when it arrives in the factory. At that point, the items will be run by conveyor to their specialized section and refined. Now, the last thing that I want to cover in this video is heights. Trains unfortunately can only go up ramps in small increments. The maximum increment that you can lift a track along is a large ramp and then a medium ramp. This combination, however, does give us a very bumpy ride. So what I prefer doing is going purely with the medium incline ramps. However, there is another very popular way to lift trains, and that is the corkscrew method. The corkscrew method is done by placing a large foundation column in the middle of our corkscrew, making a spine. From here, we will place 3 foundations on one side, then continuing in a clockwise or anti-clockwise fashion, we will place another line of 3 foundations along the side. Continue this all the way to the top. Next, we shall place a small 1 meter ramp on the last foundation of the foundations from the spine, and now, like we did with the 90-degree turn, we will bring the rail up the first arm, placing it along the middle of the ramped foundation. Continue this all the way up for a very smooth incline, and yes, you can do double corkscrews for two-way travel should you wish to. With this all said and done, this is all subject to change when trains are updated with signaling and further updates to the game, and you can bet that we will be covering that then. But until that happens, I really do hope that you found this look at train logistics useful. Now, if there's anything you feel that I've missed and want to know, then do let me know in the comment section below, as we will be answering all of them in part 4 of our logistics guide. Or if your question really can't wait, why not jump into our live stream on Twitch and YouTube and ask? Anyway guys, we are going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time, ciao for now.